Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Martin Bogdan on behalf of the CARE project and ACA, Academic Cooperation Association, and welcome to the second online talk in the framework of the CARE project. This online talk focuses on Belgium and more specifically on Flanders, as this project was had a bit more focus on Flanders than on Wallonia because of its a more developed research capacity and labor market for refugee researchers also. So for the beginning, I would like to give a few housekeeping rules. So since we're in a Zoom meeting and not a Zoom webinar, I would kindly ask all of you to keep your microphones and cameras turned off. When there will be space for discussion, I also invite you to turn your microphones and cameras on if you're comfortable with that, so we could actually see you and we can have a discussion all together. And this is basically it. And also in the chat box, feel free to pose questions while the speakers are speaking or after they finish. We will also have a dedicated time for immediate questions after each speaker. So I will start with a brief presentation of the CARE project. CARE is the EU-funded project from the Horizon 2020 and Science for Refugee initiative, which started in 2019, and it's coming to its end by the end of this year. It's being implemented by Academic Cooperation Association from Brussels, DAAD, a national agency for higher education in Germany, and IDUFI, which is also a Finnish national agency for education. Its main objective is to support labor market integration of refugee researchers and researchers at risk in 10 European countries, which are listed on the slide. We aim to provide needs-based guidance through the country guides that will be published in the middle of October, and also through this series of country-based webinars where we will discuss with relevant experts and also people from the community about the pressing issues in the European labor market integration for refugee researchers. About ACA, a few words. We are an umbrella organization of European national agencies who work in internationalization of higher education. We work partly as the policy center and a think tank, and partly as a representation of these members towards the European institutions. Here's a brief, here's a timeline of the CARE project and its main activities. So the project started in February 2019 with the stakeholder mapping. It continued with focus groups that we've conducted in each of the country, where we had a chance actually to talk with the refugee researchers with the refugee background and researchers at risk to see their experiences first-handedly. Then we also conducted an employer survey where we tried to gather as much as information as possible from the employers working in research. So this means like public institutions, but also private enterprises and representatives of the industries. We are using all of these inputs to produce the country guides, which are in the phase of finalization, and they will come out in the middle of October. And also at the same time, in parallel, we are conducting these online talks in specific online talks for each of the countries where we are discussing relevant issues, where we can come up with policy recommendations and so on. So to focus now on Flanders, I would just briefly like to present you the key findings we had in the focus groups and the employer survey. So in focus groups, as we said, we talked with refugee researchers who work in Flanders or who are trying to work in research in Flanders. And they mostly talked about challenges that they were facing, which more or less all of them can come under the umbrella on the lack of coordination, actually, on some wider level here. So this includes also like the lack of post-PhD guidance, some lack of long-term sustainable funding, which causes a lot of them to look for jobs outside of the academia. And I'm very happy that we will get a chance to hear one of those experiences today. Also, as in many other European countries, there is a high competitiveness in academia, which is present across the board. And also what was reported was the lack of diversity in academia in Flanders. There is a few of the needs and recommendations that they've proposed to us, and some of them include co-funding for PhDs with an aim to switch to industrial PhDs, and also more targeted funding like scholars at risk, that we'll have a chance to hear more about the situation with scholars at risk in Flanders. Then on the other hand, from the employers, we had a chance to hear what were the positive impacts of hiring refugee researchers, and they mostly focus on their language and professional skills, and what made them what made it possible to hire them was like adequate information and available financial support to hire these people. Also, internationalization of the workplace was one of the incentives. Also, then there were obstacles that the employers reported, and this mostly focused on the level of professional skills and language skills. So this comes both to foreign and Dutch, and this is interesting because it relates to what is their also biggest advantage. So basically, refugees with researchers, with a refugee background could actually contribute a lot with their linguistic skills, but also on the other hand, this was also seen as the obstacle when they had no local language skills. And the recognition of qualifications was also reported as an obstacle for the employers, but interestingly, not so much from the researchers. This brings me to our speakers today, and I'm very happy to introduce the three of them. We have Nancy Terryn from Ghent University, Andrea Bardyn from KU Leuven, and Zafer Kizilkaya, a researcher affiliated with VUB Brussels and working also part-time as an executive assistant in a large retail company. So I think it's a very interesting mix to hear all three of them to talk about the issues that I've outlined. So I will start with announcing Nancy Terryn from the Ghent University. Nancy has an interesting background, originally a master's in chemistry and a PhD in biotechnology from the Ghent University, where she has been working from 2008 in the office which is responsible for providing information and grants to the students and the staff, and also international collaboration with a focus to the global south. And this is how Nancy got into the whole story about researchers at risk and researchers with refugee background. And Nancy is also active in Flanders with on some policy levels. So Nancy, the floor is yours. I invite you to present us the initiatives which are happening at the Flemish higher education institutions, specifically at the Ghent University, but also feel free to reflect on some of the issues that I've outlined in my introduction. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for that, Martin. So yes, indeed, as you tell to the people that are listening, I go away back in time working with refugees, and actually it was already in 2010. I mean, long before, well, before the real refugee crisis in Europe came about, that we started to work with Scholar at Risk. I mean, this came from a mutual interest of our rector at the time, and we have a very known Center of Human Rights with Professor Eva Brems, and together we were working on academic freedom. And we were contacted by colleagues from the UAF, that's in fact the Netherlands organization that's working with refugees, so it's there in the middle of the slide, mentioned the logo. We had contact with them in other issues as well, and they started to talk about the Scholar at Risk network, where the idea was that scholars that were at risk in their own country would be offered an employment contract at a European or American university. In fact, Scholar at Risk is an American initiative, and that way would help them to come over to Europe and get some peace of mind, continue to work their academic career. Let's say their target was mainly at let's say at professors, people that had a professorship at the university. And like you see on the picture, one of our first cases was Professor Felix Caputo that came from Democratic Republic of Congo, anyway, not so democratic always, and anyway had some troubles there. He needed to flee the country, and he was in our group. And in fact, he's a good example of what you were saying, Martin, that his language skills of African languages and culture was very good for our faculty of languages. We are unique in Belgium in offering African languages. And he was part of the group, and the students loved very much to have classes from him. So that was really the philosophy of Scholar at Risk. In the follow-up of that Scholar at Risk membership, we started to have some, there was debates that we organized on the topic. 2011, 13, 14, we had the theater show on academic freedom talk, and we started also to have the webpage at Ghent that's there in the little corner, Refugees Welcome, together with our colleagues of we have a unit on diversity at Ghent University, and they started that together. So maybe the next slide can be shown. So because of because of being a contact for Scholar at Risk in Ghent University, when the refugee crisis came about, a lot of questions came. So I'm working in the research coordination office. So let's say that academics, people which had already a PhD degree, or were working towards a PhD degree in their home country at the time when they had to leave the country because of the situation, they were contacting our university and asking, how can you help me to either finalize my PhD, or I have a PhD, or I'm a medical doctor, or I'm an engineer. How can I get about to get some academic career in Belgium? And from the contact with all those people, very interesting context, but also sometimes very heartbreaking context, because there was so little that we could do at the time. We had the Scholar at Risk budget, but this was just enough for, hosting 1, maximum 2 persons per year. And the questions came from tens of people. Based on all that experience, we also pushed together with colleagues of Leuven and others, the Vrije Council. The Vrije is in fact the umbrella Flemish University Council that's coming together to have a kind of a policy document for the government to tell them what were all the issues and where we were also missing opportunities, because we saw also such a wealth of trained and skilled people entering Flanders. And we knew also that we need those skills. We are lacking some of the technological and scientific people in our country. So there was a round table where we talked basically on the same topic of today. How can we employ academic with a refugee, or maybe at larger even with a migrant background, whether that was a voluntary migration or a forced migration, and also about the academic career of those people. I put the link there of the final report. It is in Dutch, unfortunately, for those of you that do not speak Dutch. But in summary, you can understand that the problems that the refugees encountered were similar to probably in other countries. It had to do, first of all, with securing a legal position in Flanders, which getting the right paperwork done, having some financial and social stability, the language issue coming about, then about degree recognition. What is my degree? What does it mean in Belgium? What can I do with a degree? Misunderstandings from both sides about academic culture, like what is a PhD about in Belgium versus in other countries, and And basically a lot of frustration on that round table. There were a lot of academic refugees, a lot of frustration about there's no single point of contact, all the information is very spread everywhere. There are some very good ideas and intentions, but with very low budget to really help people. So, so actually a big mismatch. And a mismatch that's still there today. And even I mean, I think the remarks of that document, they were finalized in 2019 and then published, but they're still very relevant. Nothing really has changed since that time. We did hear that there was a little bit an initiative on the Flemish side, let's say, that people that came in, refugee people that came in, that had, for example, skills that we were lacking in Belgium, lacking in Flanders, they were kind of anyway recruited and hired. For example, several architects were kind of trained to become more like technical drawing experts. So it's not that like they're really working on the level that they were trained for. They don't have an architect job here, but they have been incorporated to fill a need of the market. The same happened with some medical doctors. We are short in nurses. Well, some medical doctors were advised, why don't you just work as a nurse, because we are short of that, and then you have immediately a job, and then we can go about. The main problem actually is that in Flanders, refugees are, they get their wage, let's call it like, it's not a wage, it's leefloon, it's the money they get to survive. It's really just money to survive. Depends on the OCMW, which is it's an organization affiliated to the commune or the city, and they have to pay that money. For the OCMW, the main drive is get those people at work. The faster they work, the better they will integrate. It's a very driven and activation-driven policy, but that doesn't always work for highly skilled refugees and also highly skilled people with a migrant background. So there is one of our problems. And so the idea that from the beginning on, we should have been looking at the different people, different refugees that came in, and what were their degrees, and how could we better fine-tune, almost personally fine-tune their career would have been better. I suggest I move to the next slide, because I know I'm I talk a lot. A lot has to do also with, and this might be different in other countries, but Flanders, we are a very conservative country also. And we know from other studies, this is a study from our, actually it's our Flemish Council for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, that we are really lacking international talent in our industry. And as Martin was saying in the focus group, the employers, they do agree, they do understand that bringing in international talent gives a different point of view and can enrich your company. But there is such a fear to embark on that, and not just in the, let's say, in the private market. This is the universities. So at the universities, and don't think this is 100%, this is only a few percent here. We have only 8% non-Belgians working in Belgian universities once you go up to an academic level. And of that, only a mere 1% is a non-EU people. So these are figures that are sometimes very frustrating for me to show to incoming, to people that hope that they're going to make an academic career in Flanders, because we are really not ready for that. And this is one of the policy things that should change. It has a lot to do with language. Dutch is not an easy language, and it's a barrier. And we have a political, let's say, the fight to be able to have classes in Dutch and to have a Dutch university was a fight that my grandparents were still involved in. So it's still a very active thing that this Flemish, this language, we have to maintain it, and we cannot just give all the classes in English. But this does offer, this does limit possibilities for non-speaking people to be teaching, for example, just to teach. And so this is for the universities, but also just in general in all the Flemish companies, the percentage of non-EU employers is just very low. There is a kind of fear to hire, just as Martin was saying. There is sometimes fear, there is a lack of knowledge, fear that there's going to be too much paperwork that's going to be done, fear of different cultures that will not go together. And so here is really where is the missed opportunity, according to me, that it could be a win-win situation, and that has not been really set do good. I think my last slide, I just want to tell that with Ghent, we do offer possibilities. We are thinking about why, as a university, why can we not be the hub that is needed for refugees with a higher education and academic status, to be like a hub for another job, whether it's an academic or a job outside. That means, why can't we give more people, like we're doing with Scholar at Risk actually, a 1-year employment contract? In that year, they have time to work on their language, they have time to get to know the culture of their specific domain in Belgium, like imagine the architect again. How is it working in Belgium? What is the relation between architects and engineers? How is all that going? And then they would have like a letter of recommendation of, say, 1 year in a university department. That could be a jumping stepstone towards a further career. That's one thing that we hope for and that we are trying to get about. But it does have its limitation, and a lot is related, of course, to budget that has to be devoted to it. But we have a vice rector for the moment that's surely open for the idea that we should invest a little bit more in that. Yeah, maybe that's more or less what I will say in this time that was given to me, and I'm free to answer any questions on it.
Thank you very much, Nancy. This was very insightful, and also thank you for this very critical view on the situation in Flanders. Well, on one hand, I'm quite disappointed to hear this, but also on the other hand, it's reassuring to see that what you are saying, it's kind of in line with what we've heard on the focus groups from the experiences from the researchers. So I think we kind of have some solid understanding of the situation there. And also, yes, it really seems that there is a lack of overall coordination in Flanders, and what we can see here are different initiatives like the one you have at the Ghent University and the other ones that we will hear in a minute from Leuven. So I would ask the audience if there is an immediate question, to please to turn on your microphone and camera and to raise it now, or to if it's not an immediate question, we can keep it for the discussion later.
Martin, maybe just I can add that actually there is a lot of voluntarism and a lot of goodwill also with employers. It's not that but sometimes you need some incentives maybe to push the employers just over the bridge, and that is something that truly could be done. There is also a very interesting document for those that want to read it from Itinera. Itinera is a thinking group with all kind of big brains together, and they have also been writing something about that. Yeah, there are opportunities and they should be better followed up.
Yes, exactly. This is what I meant. Like the kind of like the overarching coordination maybe is what is lacking. Then, if there are no immediate questions, I would move on to our next speaker. Thank you very much, Nancy. We'll hear from you again in the discussion. To Andrea Bardyn from Leuven. Andrea is working as a policy officer in HR and diversity, and she is dedicated, in short, to make the working environment at Leuven as diverse as possible. And she works on recruitment, inclusion, and well-being of academic and non-academic staff. And also, I'm very curious to hear about, next to the university, Andrea is one of the founders and people active in the Neighborhoods Without Borders, a civil initiative which is active in providing housing and other support to refugees and migrants in general. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, please, in Flanders. So, Andrea, the floor is yours. Thank you for speaking here. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to hear your thoughts on everything what was said until now, and for you to present the work that you've been doing.
Thank you very much. And also thank you very much for organizing this and bringing us together, because as Nancy said, the barriers are big on a structural level. And what I will present to you today is the singular perspective of our university, to give an overview of inclusion practices we have, which actually builds on the last slide of Nancy. So how we as a university try to create an inclusive environment and a more diversity among our staff, which is very much a work in progress. Most of the measures I will present today are not directly targeted to people with a refugee background specifically, but are often broader. And next to that, I will indeed present a few initiatives beyond academia. And well, I'm also here to learn mostly, so thank you for inviting me. In January, policy to welcome refugees have both in Leuven and in Flanders predominantly focused on students, in which part the Leuven has strived to increase access to current inclusion and onboarding practices rather than developing a separate program for people with a refugee background. There are, however, a few initiatives aimed at researchers or students with a refugee background. And with regard to researchers, we are a recent member, much more recent than Ghent, of the Scholars at Risk network. And we are currently preparing to host scholars from this academic year onwards, aiming at 1 to 2 scholars a year who will receive support also from a dedicated staff member. And we're also part of the European Commission initiative, Science for Refugee Network, which is a database that offers job offers. Although I must add, in general, the precise effects of that seem limited to me, in the sense that the database highlights possible vacancies, but does little to take away the actual barriers. If I broaden my scope to include students as well, we in general see that there are many barriers for newcomers to access higher education in Flanders. And remedying this remains a work in progress, which includes all societal actors. One important issue has been clear and targeted information, both on studying but also living issues. And for that, the KU Leuven has gathered all relevant information on a website, which I've linked on the slide. And also has a contact point reachable by email for dedicated questions. A second issue is language proficiency. Students here can follow, and this is the same in other universities, a 1-year preparatory language here at the Leuven Language Institute, which offers an intensive course Dutch on an academic level. And these high-level language courses can also be accessed by non-students who have received asylum, but there is a cost attached to that, and it has to be agreed to by the OCMW, which Nancy talked about, so the social welfare institution, which can be an issue. Specifically for students, which might also be PhD students, the KU Leuven also has a buddy program in which professors emeriti mentor students with a refugee background. Again, not specifically dedicated to research, but by receiving specialized guidance early on in their study career. This might be a jump start for later career development. When I move on to the next slide, I want to highlight a few inclusion practices at KU Leuven, which are aimed at increasing the diversity of our staff. They are not, again, targeted to scholars with a refugee background specifically, but they aim to facilitate that people, regardless of their background, can access positions and develop their career. Apart from the Scholars at Risk program, I understand from our HR that some of our staff members do have a refugee background, but this is not something that we register, so which I can give numbers on. And specific questions would be treated ad hoc by HR. We do register international background, which amounts to, in this year, 23% of our staff members. But as Nancy said, the number of non-EU internationals is lower, amounts for professors to 2%, and for postdocs, which is a bigger group, it's 24%. Now, if we quickly list a number of initiatives that might be good to know. First, in recruiting new professors, we have in recent years implemented measures in order to cultivate a more open-mindedness towards non-linear and atypical career paths, something with which people with a refugee background are often also confronted. This is done by making a so-called biosketch in which candidates contextualize their CV, the center of application procedures for professors, which allows to, well, get to a qualitative and holistic assessment of a CV. This is a measure that originated in gender policy, but in general allows to contextualize career breaks that might have affected academic productivity. As I said, a large share of our staff is international, and being newcomers in Belgium, they also face certain challenges, both professionally and personally, which might also be applied to the target group. So there's a lot of attention to onboarding, to supporting international staff. And this includes, among others, targeted academic language training for professors. This is free, also open to PhDs and postdocs, but then it's not free. And a grant writing workshop aimed at understanding Flemish and European grant process, orientation sessions towards Flemish society and academia, and so on. There's also a few initiatives that support building up social networks, or more broadly, what we can call human capital, so insight in job culture and labor market, in how society works, such as a buddy program for international students and staff, an intercultural meeting center, Pangaya, which offers a lot of moments for social activities and programs to facilitate integration in the university. Moving on, there's also an extensive network of confidential advisors, which provide support in case of non-acceptable behavior or discrimination. And I specifically mention this as employees with precarious contracts or residency permits often have face barriers when accessing this or when addressing non-acceptable behavior in the workplace, which is something that this network pays specific attention to. And lastly, together with the other Flemish universities, when I brought the topic to international policy, we have committed ourselves to embed respect for human rights as a permanent cornerstone in our international operations. Now, when I move on to the last slide, I also want to highlight initiatives by civil society and volunteers, which also speak to what Nancy said, that there's a lot of goodwill. In contrast to university initiatives, these are often aimed at newcomers with a refugee background specifically, but then not at scholars. However, they often focus on needs and challenges that can hinder career development and integration in society more broadly. And in this way, in the long run, might also benefit career development in research. Now, Flanders has quite an extensive civil society, and just as in other European countries, civilians have been very involved in facilitating access of newcomers in society. Often you see that they plug gaps in official policies or structures and offer a bridge to a local network. These initiatives are often, however, very fragmented and hard to find or navigate if you're new. So I will give a few overviews or places where you can find more information on them. Moreover, and this I want to stress, while the efforts of volunteers are welcome, they can never and should never replace efforts of official organizations. An overview of most local organizations and NGOs can be found on the website of Gastvrij Netwerk, a Dutch for hospital network, for which I included a link. I personally am also part of such an organization, and specifically with regard to researchers, in my experience, especially in the big university cities, these organizations or volunteer groups often count local academics among their members. So this may facilitate access to scholar networks in a much more informal, but therefore also maybe more accessible way, and can also minimize distance to official institutions in other ways. The personal involvement of academics is also apparent for more official initiatives, such as the Young Academy of Flanders, which is an association of young top researchers who want to tackle societal challenges. And they have been very active in urging government and university to increase efforts to improve access to higher education for newcomers with a refugee background. The link includes initiatives they took 2 years ago. So organizations cover various issues and themes, but I will specifically focus on two because they're very sustaining barriers. First, accessible housing in general is a major issue in Flanders and provides a particular challenge to newcomers, certainly when they don't have a job yet. The issue is made very difficult for people which have received asylum, because unlike in several neighboring countries, people have to find housing here themselves, and this within a limited time period. And I'm speaking of often a few months, which is often impossible. Being unable to find then adequate housing or affordable housing in turn forms then a significant delay for integration in the labor market, for education or language acquisition. In trying to remedy this, which is essentially a policy flaw, over 80 volunteer organizations in Flanders specifically provide support in this aspect, and I've provided a link to the network, which is called Woning Gezocht, Buren Gevonden, searching for housing, finding neighbors, of which my organization is also a member. Second, as Nancy highlighted, Belgium has very low employment rates for newcomers, also compared to other European countries. And higher educated newcomers often are employed in jobs that do not match their degrees. Recent policies and initiatives to remedy this focus both on systemic issues and on the side of employers. But to address the specific barrier of human capital, so networks, understanding of unofficial rules, soft skills, insight in the market, they also often partner with volunteers as mentors. And again, initiatives are many and fragmented, but I want to specifically highlight a recently launched project which focuses on highly educated newcomers, for which research is also provided by the KU Leuven Vrije institution. And the project is called All-in-One for Highly Educated Refugees. And it wants to provide a platform to exchange experiences and knowledge, gather job seekers and employers, and also develop a coaching system with volunteers. And in this way, create a sustainable model to fast-track labor market integration of higher educated refugees. The website is very good and provides an excellent overview, and also, which is interesting, a lot of targeted information, including a dedicated segment to research and education. You can both sign up as a job seeker, mentor, and employer on the website. Voilà, that is a very quick overview. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Andrea, for giving us this overview. Indeed, as you said, the voluntary initiatives cannot replace official organizations and institutions, but nevertheless, I think it's really helpful for the target group that we're talking about today to have them, of course. And for me, it was really interesting what you said about the Science for Refugees initiative from the European Union, because we are providing input to EUREC. And this, let's say, bridge which is needed seems like that it should be stronger. So we are happy to also contribute to this with the project and with country guides, especially, which will contain all of the information and also the structures that you have mentioned here. So thank you very much. Yes, we can continue to our third speaker, Zafer Kizilkaya. Welcome, Zafer. It's great to have you here. Zafer holds a joint PhD degree in political science at VUB and social and military studies at the Royal Military Academy of Belgium, with research interests in conflict resolution, non-state armed groups, and the Middle Eastern studies. Zafer also worked with NATO, focusing on Levant and Sahel regions. And also, Zaher at the same time works part-time, if I'm not mistaken, as an executive assistant in one large retail company. So Zafer, I can't wait to hear your input in this. And Zafer will focus on his personal experience, challenges, and suggestions he has, and also a concrete proposal for the support to the target group. So Zafer, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Martin. So my name is Zafer, as Martin said. I'm originally from Turkey, but I have been in Belgium for more than 7 years now. So in this 10 minutes, I will try to first talk about my own personal experience as a recognized refugee, and I will actually highlight some key recommendations or some key messages for the listeners of this presentation today. And in the second part of my talk, I will also highlight some concrete recommendations I have provided to this research group, which is focusing on some additional support that needs to be given to researchers with a refugee background. So starting with my own personal story, I came to Belgium in 2013. I started my PhD in 2014. And I was planning to go back to my country in 2016, but it couldn't happen. I had to seek asylum. So unlike many other refugees who have to really cross borders or cross the sea to come to Europe, I was luckier. I feel myself luckier than many other refugees. So I didn't have that experience. I was already in Belgium and I had to seek asylum, which was still not pleasant, but as I said, I feel myself luckier than many others who have to have very difficult journeys. And when I sought asylum, when I applied for asylum, I was in the half of my PhD. So I still had 2 years to complete the PhD. And then, yeah, I mean, I had a discussion with my supervisor and I actually decided to finish as quickly as possible because I didn't have the resources to sustain my life. And it was a critical turning point for me because on the one hand, I had the choice to really continue in academia and find a postdoctoral position maybe, or actually exit the academia and find a job in the business environment. So I did lots of research, and eventually what I did was in the last year of my PhD, I started sending my CVs to different companies. And when I did this, I tried to actually look at my skills and then look at what the demand is. So first key message that I want to give and I'm giving this key message to any researcher with a refugee background when I have personal context with them, especially if you are at a certain age, actually you need to look at yourself, what you want to achieve in your life in a more critical way. You don't have too much time to take risks in your life. And if you are competing in a very competitive field, political science is definitely, or I think all the social sciences are very competitive in Belgium. It's not really easy to find a place immediately. So that was the key reason. So I looked at myself critically. I mean, I was doing a really good job in my PhD. I was already publishing my articles, but I also looked at the demand side. And in the demand side, there were not many positions, and the available positions were already very, very challenging for the people who were born here, who were raised here, and who went to universities here. So key message one, look at yourself and more critically look at the demand side. And the second thing is, this is maybe a failure for myself. I was not able to prioritize what I wanted to do after I had to seek asylum. So my challenge was actually, in addition to finding a job, I had 3 different ideas, which I thought would be very useful: finding a job and also sustaining in a job. So I had 3 choices. Those were all related to languages and language skill. The first choice was French, the second choice was Dutch, and the third choice was learning a programming language, which I also consider as a language. So I was doing some statistics, so I was also interested in Python and Java and similar programming languages. So I spent too much time going from one language to the other, and maybe it was a failure or it was a wrong decision at that time. So the second key message is it's really important to prioritize, because you cannot do them all. And when you do this, of course, it's all depends on what you want to do. If you want to be in the business, make a research on look at the job descriptions. If in the type of business that you want to do, there is more of a demand for Dutch, then just go for Dutch. That's the only thing that you can do in a short time frame, maybe in 2-3 years, maybe even longer. So that was again kind of a mistake that I did, but eventually now I have all the bits and pieces in French and Dutch and programming, but I cannot say I'm good in I'm really excellent in one of them. Now, coming to the second part of my talk, what are the recommendations that I want to highlight? So I provided some written feedback to this group, and in the website of CARE, or Academic Cooperation, ACA, you will in the middle of October have these country guides, and it will be more detailed with you will have lots of information. But I want to specifically highlight here 3 main points. The first point is for a refugee who comes to a host society, I think the first 2 or 3 years are very critical. When you come to a European country, in the first 2 or 3 years, everything is new to you. You could be a professor in your country, but you are a beginner in this new country. And there are some individual examples when some people get some kind of an academic support, funding support in the first 2 or 3 years, and then they can continue in the academic career. But as mentioned or highlighted by the previous speakers, the level of support that is given to researchers with a refugee background in Flanders is really limited when you compare it to Netherlands. So Nancy talked about the case of Scholar at Risk, or the UAV, the Netherlands organization. When I really look at some examples, there are several cases that I hear from refugees who were able to get some support for their academic study in the first couple of years in Netherlands. And in Germany, there are several several foundations which are really giving some support to refugees, again in the first 3 years of their coming to the host society, but that's unfortunately somehow limited in Flanders. So that's the first thing to do. There's always more to do, and sometimes there can be some symbolic steps, like the ULB, the French equivalent of VUB. They had, for a couple of years, they supported 10 or 15 refugees from Syria when the refugee crisis made a peak. And those support, I mean, the figures, the numbers were symbolic, but it was still helpful for keeping 10 or 15 people in academia. The second point, the equivalences. I think NARIC is an excellent organization. I haven't heard too many complaints about from the refugees when it comes to getting or receiving their equivalences, but there is a very specific problem with doctors. There are doctors with PhDs. These are the doctors who have finished their specialization in their own country, who have worked in very prestigious hospitals in their own country. But when it comes to Belgium, when it comes to getting equivalences, they are facing enormous challenges. They need to do, for example, 2-year internship in a Flanders university hospitals, but in Flanders you only have 4 or 5 university hospitals, and it's a vicious circles. They are having, I know, big problems. And the last point, the third point that I want to mention here, career coaching, mentoring, these are really critical for the researchers with refugee background. There are several recent good examples, good platforms that provide this support to refugees. And I think any effort, any funding for this kind of initiatives are very, very critical for the refugees or for the researchers with a refugee background. Andrea mentioned before me one really good website, all in one for her. I really find it very useful with lots of information. They also provide support. VDAB, the Flemish Public Employment Service, I think it's also very, very good organization in my opinion. And they recently have started an initiative targeting specifically highly educated newcomers, not only refugees, but highly educated newcomers to Flanders. So I think that's something to be also explored more by the refugees. So all in all, that's all I want to say. And now I give the floor back to Martin.
Thank you very much, Zafer. I think your input was very concrete, very specific, maybe a bit too self-critical, if I may say, but I think it will be very useful for other refugees with researchers with a refugee background who are listening to this, and I hope they will find a lot of good tips and inspiration in what you've just said. Looking at the time, I would like to open the floor now for the discussion and invite the participants to raise their questions or to give us comments. So please go ahead. Please maybe write your name in the chat if you want to raise a question, and then you will be given the floor.
Hello, everyone. Well, I would like to thank all of the speakers for their contributions. And I have a question that's not necessarily only linked to Flanders, doesn't necessarily only pertain to Flanders, but I think this is something that we've seen across the board. And this is, in a way, reluctance of researchers to go out of academia, to leave academia and to work in another sector. I think Zafer explained his reasoning. So I would like to ask all of you, all of the speakers, from your different points of view and different activities and backgrounds, including also the work in the civil sector. So my question is, or just a reflection, I was wondering, how do we change this perspective? So there are very concrete examples. So Zafer gave you, as I said already, very practical view to it. So how do we change perception? How do we make sure that somehow we accommodate, in a way, for the needs of researchers and highly educated people, without necessarily offering them low-skilled jobs? Because this is what we've heard in Flanders, that a lot of the colleagues that we were in touch with, a lot of researchers, they could have found a job, but we're talking about very, very low skilled. But how do we make this transition or these links with researchers with industry? Since we cannot, the competition in academia is quite high, so not all of them can basically do research in academia. Whoever wants to start, thank you.
I put my video thinking that I could say something about that because I am in the research coordination office. So we deal with PhDs from all kind of different nationalities. And indeed what we see is that, also Flemish PhDs and also European PhDs, they all dream to make an academic career. An academic career looks to them like, yeah, that's really what they want to do and that's their target. And so even in our own doctoral school program, we have really now we have courses to explain about the potential as a PhD to have other jobs. You don't have to be in academics. Even like in my own case, I am a PhD holder, and because of that, you have extra value to, in this case, to the administration of the university. So there are a lot of PhD holders in the administration of the university, because how can you judge, how can you coordinate research if you have never done that yourself? So you are needed. And also we teach them certain skills that will be needed outside of academia. But we do, we have indeed that problem. And it's not just with refugees, it's just in general. Everybody seem to dream, I mean, during the PhD, they hope they will make an academic career. And that last, and the postdoc position, that's always still possible. You can get funding here and there, so they stay. And then after the postdoc, it's like the big, okay, what am I going to do now? And I'm not good enough, sorry, it's too competitive to be in the professor, to get a professorship. What are my options? And so that is indeed a problem.
And maybe if I add more, one more thing to your question, Maria. The industry will not change itself. So they are looking for certain talents. I think here it's up to the researcher, the person with PhD or a postdoctoral researcher, to look at what the industry needs. And I can easily say that soft skills, I mean, they matter, but there is an increasing demand for hard skills, analytical skills. And I think it's a responsibility, it's on the shoulders of the researchers to actually adapt to the needs of the industry rather than shifting it. That's my, again, maybe somewhat practical opinion on the subject.
Yeah. Zafer, you're right. It also depends in which area did you get your PhD. Yeah. I mean, there are areas that as a university, our best people go away to industry.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
So it really depends on the area that you are. When it's a competitive area, there is a hunt for your brain.
Well, I had similar comments as my fellow speakers. So, yeah, I can only underline what they already said. And maybe to highlight maybe the value of mentorship, we've started a program, because especially that transition to the non-academic world for certainly the people who come from a humanities background can be hard. So we've also started a mentoring program as a pilot, in which mentors from the industry mentor PhDs. But it's difficult because you're in a very competitive environment, and while you may be still dreaming for an academic career, you also have to prepare for the reality that maybe you will not have an academic career and work on your soft skills, but your time is limited, and it's not easy. No.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting here. I think we have two approaches. One would be more like a social approach, where we want to find any kind of job for the refugee researchers coming here. But then I'm also wondering, what does this mean for the research environment now we're talking about Flanders, but it could be any other country, because we're actually not really expanding the positions in research, right? Or these positions are so competitive that they cannot actually take on more people and hire more people, while at the same time we can often hear that highly skilled researchers are needed in countries. So for me, this is kind of like where I see kind of like just a discrepancy between what is often publicly proclaimed, especially if we talk about the context of the pandemic, where it's often highlighted that research is needed, that researchers are needed. But then when you have highly skilled and qualified researchers already in the country, then it said, well, you know, it's very complicated, it's competitive. You might as well look for a job somewhere else because it would be easier for everyone. This is just a comment. I don't know if you want to react. Maybe I see Nancy is.
Yeah, well, Martin, it's what I was saying in my talk. I know that there was, like to the medical doctors, you're right, Zafer, that it's very hard. And then they just tell them, why don't you just start to work as a nurse and then, or like a medical assistant or something like that. At least you have a job, you have an income. And then later on, you know, you can maybe study again but yeah, you just bring them to a lower level in a way. And I understand that the hospital in Ghent, University Hospital, we have also doctors working with refugee background or migrant background. Yeah, it's true. I think we do need highly skilled brains, researchers in certain domains. I can give an example. My brother is working in a construction, well, he's an engineer and working with a big construction company. They've had a really hard time to find engineers that can be project managers of the sites, of the building sites, people with the good, they need to have a very good brain to understand all the technicalities of the construction of a huge building, but also the soft skills. They have to be able to talk to the people, so they have to be able to talk Dutch. You cannot be an engineer and you come and all your construction guys, they only talk Dutch, so you have to be able to communicate. He says it's such a hard time to find somebody, and he has been now taking on board people with a refugee background, but it takes a lot of energy from them because they have to also explain about the different cultures, the different realities of the Belgium work. And so his idea, that's why I also say, why as a university can we maybe not be more a stepping stone for those people that while working in a university protected environment, sort of protected environment, of course, who is going to pay for that is the question that follows, but that can be a stepping stone, that if a professor from a Flemish university would say to a company, well, this guy was 2 years in my department, super enthusiastic guy, motivated, you know, good skills, they would probably be less doubtful to take it on board. I'm just thinking, because I'm talking about language now, about this Dutch, I think as a university, we also have to look to ourselves for that we have been maybe making some mistakes, because we always say, oh, you know, for a PhD, it's not so important. English is the language of science, and you can just come and everybody speaks English, and you're all speaking English in coffee breaks and lunches. And then you finish your PhD and you realize that without a basic, not even a basic, without a good knowledge of the PhD, you cannot get into the Flemish labor market, because almost every job, I mean, talk about medical doctors, you need to communicate to your patient, talk an engineer has to be able to talk to the people, the construction guys. So almost in every job, you do need to be able to communicate with people that not always understand English. And this is something that we as universities have maybe, been too self-evident about and has not been helpful. I see Zafer. It's not. Yeah, we don't help the people with that. And my own husband is actually a refugee long time ago. Chile, Pinochet, 73. Got into a university environment, he still cannot talk Dutch. I mean, he can say, yeah, basic stuff, you know, go to the shop and everything, but always in the protected environment of university, you just don't get the incentive to learn Dutch. So that's something we as universities have to work on.
Indeed, very, very good points. I see a question in the chat from Swati, who would like to speak, and then Zafer, is it okay then if you can come in later? So Swati, Pamela, please go ahead with the microphone and the camera, or just the microphone as you want.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much. I'm Swati. I'm from India, and I'm doing my PhD actually in the University of Geneva, but I'm now in Belgium because I married a Belgian man. And I'm doing my PhD on this lower caste community called Dalits and their mobilization, especially women and women's movement and how they impact policy processes. Now, when I was listening to the speakers, saying that there is a people doing PhD, they want to remain in academia. Well, reasons for me to be into academia, or people that are from diverse background or marginalized communities, is that the knowledge production in academia, in academic community, is not representing marginalized communities or diverse communities. And whoever is doing research on these communities come from a certain privileged background. So, people like me who come from the community would like to represent and hold our narratives and speak in the academic world and spread awareness, and continue this dialogue and decolonizing, and the spaces of like academic spaces, research spaces. So I think these could be aspirations of people coming from refugee background, marginalized backgrounds, and that needs to be taken into consideration as well. Like it's not only the jobs and staff membership number increasing, but how that contributes into a certain kind of environment where diversity is actually really supporting in a certain way of knowledge production. So that's my point, in fact, not a question.
Thank you very much, Swati. I think it's a really great point, and it really adds up to what researchers from these communities can actually bring, which is a diversity of voices that, as you said, kind of like, let's say, local communities are maybe often not able to comprehend and not able to see it from these positions. Zafer wanted to add something on the previous note, I think, but also I think, Andrea, if you want to add, please go ahead.
Andrea, go ahead, please.
You're muted, Andrea.
I wanted to add that indeed I completely agree with what Swati said. That as a university, we want excellent knowledge production, and that thrives with a diversity of background and perspectives. So that's very much part of the main reason why we should all work towards this. And when it comes to barriers, I also want to come back very quickly to what Nancy also said in her talk, that once you get an asylum recognition here in Belgium, the system is very much focused on getting you as quickly as possible, not dependent on the system anymore. So in a stable income. And if you want to bring your family for family recognition, that's a requirement. So it's the system doesn't facilitate taking the time enough to translate your skills to the local market, to develop your language on that level. And that's really something that I hope can change.
Thank you, Andrea.
And Martin, I have 3 quick remarks, if we have time.
Please go ahead, and we can.
So I will try to again emphasize the issue with the doctors. It's not that my wife is a doctor or anything like that. So I agree with Nancy, but the problem is, for example, my wife was an English teacher in Turkey. She cannot do that job here in Belgium for several different reasons, but she's working in a creche, and that's an English creche. So for a teacher to be working in a creche, it's still okay. But when it comes to a doctor with specialization, requesting her to be a nurse, I'm not saying Nancy suggested that, but there is a big gap. So I think there still needs to be something to be done for the doctors, and specifically that's related to their internship, that the stage for 2 years. It can be extended to non-Flemish universities or private universities, private maybe hospitals. I think there can be a quick fix for that, but that's a significant problem. The second point I like to make is it adds up to what Swati says. We actually need more diversity in academia from the researchers, and especially for the refugees, maybe additional support in the first 2 or 3 years that will keep some refugees in academia, and maybe after those 2 or 3 years they will not stay in Belgium, or but they will go to a neighboring European country for another academic, for continuing their academic career. So in a nutshell, more support is needed in that 2 or 3 years. And last point, when it comes to a point that Nancy mentioned in her talk, and also in your slides, the industry, the labor market is kind of hesitant in maybe recruiting refugees because they need some references. And one way to get that references, that's the last thing that I will say. Maybe as a refugee, the industry is hesitant to take you, but if you go to VDAB, if you follow a 6-month training that is really relevant to what you have done in your life, your instructors at VDAB will be your referees, and it will really facilitate your job when finding a job. Sorry about taking your time. This is all I want to say.
No need to be sorry, Zafer. Thank you very much, because this is very, very helpful. If there are no more questions, I would slowly bring this online talk to an end by outlining what Andrea said is, and she said, like, if we want excellent research, we need diverse research, and I absolutely think this is necessary, especially because often we hear the argument of excellence as one of the reasons for not hiring researchers with a refugee background, because often you can hear that they're simply not good enough. But then I think it also is maybe a time to rethink the whole excellence in academia and how do we measure it and which voices we would like to bring in. But this is for another discussion. So thank you very much to the speakers and to the participants for following us. I would only like to announce the second 2 online talks that we will be having. One is tomorrow afternoon for Germany, and the other one is on Wednesday afternoon for Norway. You can still register. The information is on our website. So for those who are interested on the situation in Germany and in Norway, I encourage all of you warmly to register. And the link is in the chat provided for the registrations, so please go ahead. So once again, thank you very much to everyone. And I wish you all a nice afternoon. And if there are any questions or if you want to get back to us, the contact details are shared on the website. So please feel free to drop us a line. Thank you very much.